At 22:13 a.m. on November 13, 1942, Fireman First Class Harold Hal Metzger pressed his back against a watertight door in the flooded compartment of USS Juneau and felt the ocean trying to kill him through 3 inches of steel. 22 years old, 11 months at sea, raised on a steel mill floor in Youngstown, Ohio, where his father taught him that a man who understood pressure understood everything. Metzger had spent 340 days learning every compartment of the Atlanta-class light cruiser. He knew which hatches stuck, which valves ran slow, which welds were thin. The torpedo had hit 40 seconds ago. The watertight door behind him had taken shrapnel damage. Its locking mechanism was gone. The sea was pouring in at 300 gallons per minute through the breach on the other side. If that door swung open, 47 men in the passage beyond would drown in 4 minutes. The manual said to evacuate and seal the section from the main deck. The main deck was already under 6 feet of water. Standard procedure was impossible, so Metzger planted his boots, pushed his spine into the door, and held. The Navy's watertight integrity system was designed to contain flooding and save ships. Standard doctrine said damaged compartments should be sealed by closing and dogging hatches from the outside. 17 individual locking bolts, hand-cranked tight, forming a pressure seal. The manual specified a 2-man team, 90 seconds to complete. In testing, it worked perfectly. But by November 1942, the waters around Guadalcanal had swallowed 24 American ships in 6 weeks. The pattern was always the same: torpedo hit, shrapnel damage to nearby hatches, locking mechanisms jammed or blown off, water flooding through unsealed compartments, power loss, sinking. Metzger had seen the reports. On October 11th, USS Duncan was lost in 6 minutes because a single watertight door in the forward section failed to seal after shrapnel destroyed its locking dogs. 167 men died. On November 12th, the night before, USS Atlanta had gone down 8 miles from where Juneau now sat, partly because flooding through a single unsealed bulkhead overwhelmed her pumps within 12 minutes. 172 men lost. The problem wasn't crew training, as the official reports suggested. It was that shrapnel consistently destroyed the mechanical locking dogs on hatches within the blast radius. The mechanism required all 17 dogs to be functional. Lose 3, and the hatch could not hold pressure above 14 psi. At 200 gallons per minute, pressure inside the compartment reached 22 psi in under 3 minutes. The door blew open. When Metzger had raised this in a damage control briefing in September, the executive officer said it was an equipment maintenance issue. The official position was that properly maintained hatches met Navy specifications. Changing hatch design required a Bureau of Ships formal request, 6-month review minimum. Metzger had filed a written maintenance report instead. Nothing changed. Metzger knew the door behind him had lost at least 9 of its 17 locking dogs. He'd heard them shear away when the torpedo hit. That meant the hatch could not hold, not mechanically, not ever. But it could hold if something else held it. He had 190 pounds and 2 legs stronger than any mechanism the Navy had installed. He planted his right foot against the deck lip, put his left against the ladder brace 18 inches up the bulkhead, pressed his entire spine and shoulders flat against the hatch face, and pushed. He had approximately 4 minutes before he'd know if it would work. This was November 1942. The Japanese Navy controlled the waters off Guadalcanal at night. They called it the slot, and they owned it. In 6 weeks of fighting, the U.S. had lost 2 cruisers, 6 destroyers, and over 700 men in these waters. Juneau had already taken 1 torpedo amidships. A second had detonated near the forward fire room. She was listing 12 degrees to port and losing power. If Metzger held, 47 men in the passage survived long enough to reach the main deck. If the door gave, the flooding would reach the secondary fire room in 4 minutes, cutting remaining power entirely, and those men drowned in the dark. He felt the ocean push against his spine. 22 years old. He held.
If you want to see how one man held back the Pacific Ocean with nothing but his own body while his ship sank beneath him, hit subscribe right now. We bring you the most intense true stories from history that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.
At 22:13 hours, the second torpedo struck Juneau's port side, 14 feet below the waterline, detonating her forward ammunition magazine. The explosion was heard 20 miles away. Metzger felt the blast through the deck plates. The hatch buckled outward 2 inches, snapped back. He lost his footing, slammed his elbow into the ladder brace, got back up, planted his boots, held. The water was waist deep, then chest deep. The compartment was flooding from a 10-inch breach in the adjacent bulkhead he couldn't reach. 38-degree ocean water, cold enough to kill in 20 minutes through exposure alone. He heard men on the other side of the door, voices panicked. He couldn't respond, couldn't move his weight off the door. At 22:17 hours, 4 minutes after the hit, the pressure peaked. He felt it, like a wall pressing into his spine. His boots began to slide. He pushed back, harder. His legs were shaking. He planted harder, found a ridge in the deck plating with his right heel, braced. The pressure held, the door held, he held. At 22:19 hours, Juneau rolled 18 degrees to starboard. Metzger slid sideways but kept his back against the door, scrabbling with his feet to find purchase. For 11 seconds, he held the door purely with arm and shoulder pressure against the frame. Water hit his chin. Then the ship came back 7 degrees. He found the deck, planted again. At 22:21 hours, bosun's mate second class Raymond Vela, 26, came down the passage from the main deck. He saw Metzger, understood immediately. Vela wedged himself beside him, shoulder to shoulder. Both men pressed flat against the hatch face. 2 backs, 2 sets of legs, 370 combined pounds. The door held. At 22:24 hours, the last of the 47 men cleared the passage above them. Petty Officer James Dumont, 31, shouted down, "Clear! Get up here!" Metzger and Vela held the door 4 more seconds, then they ran. The hatch blew open behind them before they reached the first ladder. The flooding compartment equalized in 40 seconds. It didn't matter anymore. The men were out. The action lasted 11 minutes. In that time, Harold Metzger held a failed watertight door against 22 psi of ocean pressure using only his body. Juneau sank at 22:47 hours, 23 minutes later. Of her crew of 697, 115 survived. The 47 men in that passage were among them. They found Metzger clinging to a life raft at dawn, November 14th. With hypothermia and a fractured left elbow from the ladder brace impact. He had been in 38-degree water for 26 minutes. Raymond Vela survived beside him. When the rescue ship USS Meade pulled them aboard at 06:12 hours, Vela told the medical officer what Metzger had done. The officer looked at Metzger for a long moment, said nothing, then wrote it down. The official damage control assessment filed by surviving officers documented the following. The hatch in question had lost 11 of 17 locking dogs and could not have maintained pressure integrity under combat flooding conditions. It noted that the compartment's flooding was delayed by approximately 11 minutes beyond standard failure timelines through improvised personnel measures. The 47 men who escaped through that passage included 6 officers and 41 enlisted men, all of whom survived the sinking and eventual rescue. Harold Metzger received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal in March 1943. The citation read, "For heroic conduct not involving conflict with the enemy." Fireman First Class Metzger, with complete disregard for his own safety and in the face of certain death by drowning, maintained watertight integrity of a critical bulkhead through manual effort under extreme flooding conditions, enabling the survival of 47 shipmates. The Japanese submarine I-26 had fired both torpedoes that struck Juneau, confirmed in Japanese naval records recovered after the war. Commander Minoru Yokota, 39, had targeted the cruiser specifically because Atlanta-class ships were fast enough to threaten his escape route. He expected the second torpedo to detonate the ammunition magazine and achieve an immediate kill. It did. By Japanese damage estimates, Juneau should have sunk in under 6 minutes. She sank in 34. Japanese intelligence debriefing of I-26's patrol report noted the discrepancy, but attributed it to variation in magazine flooding rates. What they didn't know, couldn't know, was that one fireman in a flooded compartment had bought 11 minutes with his spine. 11 minutes that meant 47 men reached the deck instead of the bottom. Harold Metzger survived the war. He returned to Youngstown, Ohio in September 1945, took a job at Republic Steel, the same mill where his father had worked, and stayed for 31 years. He died in February 1989 at age 69. When his son asked him once what it felt like to hold that door, Metzger said, "Cold. Mostly I remember the cold." He never joined a veterans organization, never gave a public speech. The Navy incorporated lessons from Guadalcanal losses into revised damage control doctrine in 1944, including redundant locking mechanisms on critical bulkhead hatches. The revision didn't credit Metzger. It cited cumulative combat data from the Solomons campaign. Today, Metzger's Navy and Marine Corps medal is on display at the National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas. His citation hangs beside it in a small frame. That's the story of Harold Metzger. One fireman, one failed door, 11 minutes. Proof that sometimes the human body holds when every mechanism fails.
If this story moved you, hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from history every day. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Harold Metzger isn't forgotten.